It all started on a bright Saturday morning. The sun was blazing, the summer heat was perfect for swimming, and our backyard was already buzzing with excitement. We had planned the ultimate pool party for weeks: music, snacks, inflatables, and even a little DIY tiki bar. But as we started setting everything up, I noticed her. Standing across the street with her clipboard and that unmistakable scowl was Karen. You know, the type, the kind of neighbor who seems to think she's the unofficial mayor of every street, HOA rules memorized like sacred scripture. And today, apparently, our pool party had officially crossed the line. I could feel the tension before she even spoke. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice piercing through the laughter of kids and the hum of the pool pump. "I think you all need to reconsider this party. It's far too loud, and it's causing disruption." Her words were formal, rehearsed, and somehow even more infuriating because she was smiling while saying them, like she was doing us a favor by delivering bad news. It wasn't just a complaint, it was a declaration of war. But here's the thing about Karen: she thrives on control. She feeds off fear, awkwardness, and the idea that people will fold under her rules. And that, my friends, is exactly why we decided not to fold. Instead of panicking or apologizing, we huddled together. I could see the spark in everyone's eyes, the same spark that had gotten us into this exact moment. We weren't just going to have a pool party. We were going to turn her attempt to stop us into the event of the summer. We quickly brainstormed: if Karen wanted to make this about rules and complaints, we'd make it about fun and unity. Flyers were printed in record time, invitations sent to neighbors we barely knew, and suddenly, our quiet backyard gathering was turning into something much bigger. Music playlists were coordinated, floaties were inflating like balloons in a parade, and the scent of barbecue drifted through the air. Each small preparation felt like a tiny rebellion, a subtle defiance wrapped in sunblock and laughter. By mid-morning, the first curious neighbors began to peek over fences. We greeted them with snacks and cold drinks, joking and chatting like old friends. Some were hesitant, unsure if stepping into the chaos was a good idea. But once they heard the laughter, saw the colorful floats, and felt the energy, they couldn't resist. Slowly, our backyard was filling with people, families, kids, even a few dogs, all drawn to the irresistible magnetism of fun that Karen had tried so hard to suppress. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about a pool party anymore. It was about reclaiming joy, standing up to unnecessary negativity, and proving that sometimes a little defiance can unite a neighborhood in ways you never expected. The sun shone brighter, the music felt louder, and the energy in the air was electric. We were no longer just party hosts, we were the architects of a rebellion wrapped in summer vibes. By early afternoon, our little pool party had exploded into something no one expected, not even us. What started as a handful of friends splashing around had turned into a full-blown neighborhood gathering. Kids were racing on inflatables, adults were lounging under umbrellas with drinks in hand, and the sound of laughter echoed off every house on the block. It was as if the entire street had collectively decided, we're done letting Karen dictate our fun. Of course, she hadn't disappeared, far from it. Karen stood across the street, her clipboard still clutched tightly, lips pursed, eyes narrowing with each sheer and cannonball. She muttered to herself, scribbling something, probably a formal complaint she intended to deliver. But here's the twist: the more she fumed, the more energized everyone else became. Her disapproval had inadvertently fueled the party. Suddenly, it wasn't just about fun, it was about defiance. Every splash, every laugh, and every Marco Polo call was a small victory over her rigid control. Her disapproval had inadvertently fueled the party. Suddenly, it wasn't just about fun, it was about defiance. Every splash, every laugh, and every Marco Polo call was a small victory over her rigid control. Then came the unexpected. One by one, neighbors who had been quiet and reserved for years started joining in. Mrs. Thompson from next door brought her homemade lemonade and set up a small table by the pool. Mr. Diaz, the retired firefighter, grabbed a portable speaker and started a playlist that had everyone dancing in flip-flops and swimsuits. Even shy teenagers who usually retreated into their rooms were now laughing uncontrollably, competing in pool games and water balloon fights. The backyard had transformed from our private space into a neighborhood hub of energy, connection, and pure summer joy. And yet, Karen's reaction only escalated. She stomped across the street, waving her hands and demanding we stop the music. Her attempts to assert authority were met with smiles, nods, and polite explanations that yes, we were aware of the rules but no, this was a community moment everyone wanted to enjoy. She glared, her red face reflecting a mix of frustration and disbelief, while the rest of us silently cheered at how effective our rebel backyard strategy had become. We decided to raise the stakes. A makeshift volleyball net went up, and a pool Olympics competition started. Kids and adults teamed up, cheering each other on, forgetting about boundaries, HOA rules, and even social norms for a few golden hours. Karen, still glaring from the sidelines, was powerless against the sheer momentum of Joe. Every splash, every cheer, every high five was a tiny rebellion against the negativity she had tried to impose. By late afternoon, it was clear, this was no longer just our party. It was a neighborhood event that Karen couldn't stop, no matter how hard she tried. Our backyard had become a symbol of small triumph of freedom, laughter, and togetherness over arbitrary control. The energy was contagious, and even some of the initially hesitant neighbors had brought snacks and drinks, adding to the vibe. By late afternoon, the backyard was a chaotic, colorful paradise. Music pulsed through the neighborhood, kids were laughing like their lives depended on it, and adults were fully embracing the carefree energy of the day. The inflatable slides, pool noodles, and water balloons had turned our small backyard into a miniature water park. It was more than a party, it was a statement. But as we were celebrating, we could feel it. Karen wasn't done. She stormed up to the edge of the driveway, this time not with polite words or clip suggestions. She brought reinforcements, a small stack of HOA pamphlets, a notebook filled with violations, and most intimidating of all, a Bluetooth megaphone. She raised it to her lips and began what she likely imagined would be a commanding speech. "This gathering is in direct violation of community rules," she yelled, her voice amplified tenfold. "Noise, overcrowding, and unsafe conduct. This cannot continue." For a moment, the crowd froze. A hush fell over the party as people turned to face the spectacle. Some neighbors exchanged nervous glances. But instead of fear, a wave of solidarity washed over everyone. We had reached a tipping point. Karen's intimidation tactics no longer had power. Smiles returned, laughter erupted even louder, and the water fights escalated. It was as if her megaphone had become a comedic prop rather than a weapon of control. That's when inspiration hit. We decided to take the party to the next level, not just a backyard gathering anymore, but a full-blown neighborhood event. One of our neighbors, Mrs. Patel, had a large open field nearby. Within minutes, we were moving games, music, and tables over there. Families followed, bringing chairs, picnic blankets, and more snacks. Karen's attempts to assert authority became irrelevant. The event had outgrown her reach. As we set up the new location, something magical happened. Strangers were now chatting, kids from different streets were teaming up in competitions, and neighbors who had barely waved in passing were now exchanging laughter and stories. The sense of unity was palpable. Karen, meanwhile, remained at the edge of the original yard, fuming and shouting, powerless to stop the growing celebration. Every cheer, every splash, every high five was a reminder that rules could never dampen genuine joy. By sunset, the party had taken on a life of its own. The field was a vibrant sea of color, music, and laughter, and Karen's presence had dwindled to a frustrated footnote. It was clear, no clipboard, megaphone, or complaint could overshadow what we had created. The neighborhood was alive, connected, and thriving, all because we refused to let one person's negativity define our summer. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the neighborhood party had reached full momentum. What had started as a small backyard gathering was now a sprawling celebration that felt like a mini festival. Music, laughter, and the scent of barbecue floated through the air, carrying an energy that no one, including Karen, could ignore. Kids were running relays across the grass, teenagers were huddled in groups inventing water games, and adults were competing in friendly contests, from cornhole to impromptu dance-offs. The most surprising part of the day wasn't the chaos, it was the connections forming among neighbors. Families who had only exchanged nods before were now sharing snacks, trading stories, and laughing together. Even people who had been skeptical about joining the fun were now fully immersed. Our small rebellion had turned into a community movement. uniting people through the simple joy of summer play. It was incredible to witness how one act of defiance against negativity could blossom into something so powerful. And then came the unexpected alliances. Mrs. Thompson, who had initially been shy and hesitant, found herself teaming up with Mr. Diaz to lead a water balloon tournament. Teenagers who usually avoid adults were now organizing a relay race through the sprinklers, coordinating the teams themselves. Even neighbors who had been on the fence about participating were suddenly contributing, whether by bringing extra drinks, setting up lounge chairs, or cheering louder than anyone else. It was like the neighborhood had collectively decided, we are stronger, happier, and more connected when we choose fun over fear. Meanwhile, Karen's presence had dwindled. Her attempts to interrupt the festivities had grown weaker as the crowd's energy became unstoppable. She shouted over the laughter, but her words fell flat against the roar of joy and camaraderie. By now, it was clear to everyone. The party was no longer ours alone, it belonged to the neighborhood. Even those who had quietly watched from the sidelines were joining in, tipping the scales further against Karen's rigid control. As dusk approached, we lit lanterns and set up a small projector for a movie under the stars. Families gathered on blankets, kids in pajamas still dripping from pool fun, while adults sipped drinks and reminisced about earlier moments of the day. The backyard had transformed again, this time into a cozy, magical space where memories were being made. The joy and unity were tangible. It was more than a party, it was a celebration of community, freedom, and standing up for what brings people together. By the end of the evening, everyone was laughing, dancing, and sharing stories, leaving Karen on the sidelines, powerless against the overwhelming force of neighborhood solidarity. Our small act of defiance had not only preserved the party, it had created bonds that would last far beyond the summer. By the time the night settled in, the neighborhood party had reached its unforgettable peak. Lanterns glowed softly across the lawn, the projector flickered a family-friendly movie on a blank wall, and the laughter that had defined the entire day continued, echoing like a celebration of freedom itself. What had begun as a small backyard pool party was now a legendary neighborhood event, something people would be talking about for years. It was proof that joy, creativity, and community spirit could triumph over negativity and control. Karen, of course, had not abandoned her post entirely. She lingered at the edge of the yard, clipboard still in hand, muttering complaints and waving her arms as if sheer effort could reclaim control. But by now, the energy of the crowd was impenetrable. Adults were chatting, kids were snuggled in blankets watching the movie, and families, who had barely spoken to each other before, were sharing food and stories. No matter how loudly Karen protested, her voice was drowned out by the overwhelming chorus of unity and happiness she had tried and failed to suppress. The turning point came unexpectedly. Several neighbors, emboldened by the day's events, walked over to Karen not with hostility, but with calm, polite words. "We appreciate rules, but today was about community," one neighbor said. "Everyone had a wonderful time, and we'd like to keep this spirit going." Slowly, even Karen's closest allies began to acknowledge that resistance was pointless. The neighborhood had spoken, not through confrontation, but through laughter, togetherness, and collective joy. We watched as the final moments of the day unfolded. Children chasing fireflies, adults swapping stories under the soft glow of lanterns, and neighbors making plans to gather again soon. The backyard, once just our personal space, had become a symbol of unity and resilience. It was a vivid reminder that standing up to unnecessary negativity doesn't always require anger or confrontation. It requires creativity, courage, and a willingness to bring people together. By the end, even Karen had no choice but to leave, muttering to herself as she retreated down the street. But her departure didn't feel like a victory for anyone. It simply underscored the undeniable fact: joy, community, and human connection are far stronger than arbitrary control. We had turned a simple pool party into a movement, showing that when people refuse to be cowed, amazing things can happen. As the night came to a close, the last guests waved goodbye, promising to return for future gatherings. The backyard was quiet now, but the energy lingered in the air, a mixture of accomplishment, relief, and pure happiness. We had not just hosted a party. We had redefined what it meant to be a community, proving that fun and togetherness can overpower negativity and turn even the toughest Karen into a mere footnote in the story of a neighborhood united. Enjoying this wild neighborhood showdown with Karen? Hit that subscribe button to catch more epic HOA stories and backyard adventures. Also, give this a like if it made you laugh, and drop a comment below. Let me know what you would do if a neighbor tried to ruin your summer fun.